You wake slowly, not with a start, but with the gradual lifting of the weight that has kept you still. The air in the small dwelling is heavy and cool, carrying the composite sense of last night's banked fire and the mustiness of dried straw. You listen first to the house itself, feeling for any creak or shift, listening to the damp settling within the timber frame, a sound as familiar as your own breathing. Sunlight has not yet found its way through the small, oiled wooden window, so everything remains in that muted gray light of pre-dawn. It is a quiet wait, this time before the sun rises, a profound stillness broken only by the faint, irregular clucking from a corner, or perhaps just an imaginary sound your mind conjures to confirm you are awake. You feel the straw beneath you, rough and uneven against your spine, shifting slightly as you draw one knee up. It is not comfortable resting, but it is solid enough. It has borne witness to countless slow mornings before yours. Moving slowly, you begin the ritual of rising. You push yourself up onto your elbows, feeling the slight stiffness in your joints that comes from hours spent in a single posture. The movement is economical, done without haste or great urgency. As you sit upright, your clothes feel cool against your skin, coarse wool spun from local sheep, dyed with whatever available earth tones pigment can yield. They smell faintly of wood smoke and the stored heat of previous labors, a scent that speaks of community life and necessary sustenance. You notice how the fabric resists the movement slightly, a gentle, fibrous drag that is utterly normal for this material, built for durability rather than comfort. The cloth feels weighty against your skin, anchoring you to the realities of your day. You rise from the sleeping pallet, your bare feet meeting the packed earth floor. It is surprisingly cool underfoot, carrying away the last traces of night's deep chill. You shuffle toward the small basin near the corner, where a bucket holds yesterday's washing water. The air here has two distinct smells, the earthy dampness of the ground and the subtle, sweet sourness that suggests stale bread remnants mixed with the faint, smoky bitterness left in the shadows. These are the scents of routine, smells that mean survival, that speak only of continuous daily presence. The first necessary action is gathering yourself, literally. You strip off the outer layers you wore for sleeping, folding them loosely upon a low bench. The clothes feel dry against your fingers now, smelling more sharply of accumulated dust and wood smoke than they did when you first awoke. As you work to tie up any stray garments or straighten any folds, you think about the passage of time that these objects represent, each wrinkle a slight movement of yesterday, each smell a reminder of labor endured and survived. There is little hurry in the process. You know that the true preparation for the day does not begin with the work itself, but with the careful handling of the tools required for it. Your gaze drifts toward the corner where your implements rest. There are wooden handles worn smooth by generations of hands, metal bits dull and darkened with years of use. Some require a slow dusting off from the accumulated grime of night. Some simply need to be gathered into a ready pile. You approach them slowly, moving deliberately. The wood grain is visible under the low light, possessing complex patterns that tell quiet stories of where they were grown and how they were shaped by human hands long ago. Picking up a tool, perhaps a trowel or a sharpened piece of wood or an old carving knife, you test its weight in your hand. It feels right, balanced for the task it is meant to perform. You run a thumb over the edge, feeling the minute imperfections and slight nicks that speak less of breakage and more of use. These objects are not beautiful by modern standards. They are functional, their beauty found only in their reliable utility. You observe how the metal part has oxidized slightly at the joints, creating a faint reddish-brown patina that speaks of damp earth and neglect. The air shifts marginally as you brush against a basket of kindling nearby. The dry twigs make a delicate, papery scratching sound against each other, a whisper in the overwhelming quiet. You gather just enough wood to rekindle the small cooking flame, or perhaps the oil lamp for the morning's requirements. Handling the kindling is a surprisingly tactile experience. You feel the varying resistance of bark and dry wood, the brittle snap that gives way easily under pressure. There is no rush to start the fire, but rather a methodical arrangement, stacking them in a pyramidal shape, allowing the smallest pieces to cradle the larger ones. As this quiet ritual unfolds around you, drawing energy from the simple acts of preparing and maintaining, your mind begins to organize itself alongside your body. You reflect on the coming hours, the chill that will soon demand attention, the earth that must be worked, the people who will pass by, each with their own similar, unstated routine. This knowledge anchors you. The early morning demands a deep respect for slowness. To rush now would be to waste the precious, quiet energy of the dawn itself. You carry the light weight of these small preparations, the stacked kindling, the organized tools, the renewed understanding of your own steady rhythm. You turn from the workbench, pausing just at the edge of the dwelling's threshold. The coolness of the air outside is more immediate than the stagnant dampness inside, carrying with it a faint promise of life beginning in the outer woods, a smell mingling wood smoke with wet soil and something clean, the distant scent of running water. This shift marks the quiet transition from the sanctuary of your home to the reality of the day's necessary labors, a movement performed without dramatic flair, simply by stepping into the rising light. The first hint of the pale sun does not wake you, but it calls you gently out. You rise from the straw bedding, feeling the residual damp chill cling to your bare feet. The wooden door under your hand is cool and slick beneath your touch. Slipping outside, the air is still thick with the coolness of deep night, carrying the earthy scent of wet soil mixed with the sharp, clean tang of pine sap from the surrounding woods. You pull on the woolen tunic that has seen use before, the fibers rough against your skin, smelling faintly of smoke and dried sweat. The world outside your dwelling feels hushed, save for the occasional low clucking sound or the soft shift of an animal settling in its sleep nearby. Your walk is slow, careful, as if you are moving through a dreamscape where the edges are still fuzzy and indistinct. You follow the narrow path that slopes gently downward, knowing instinctively that this way leads toward the water. The ground beneath your feet remains damp gravel and packed earth, cool under the soles of your worn leather shoes. As you walk deeper into the village's periphery, you notice the architecture around you, the thick wattle and daub walls leaning together for support against the elements. Each house bears its story in chipped plaster and patched timbers, a quiet testament to generations who have lived and breathed within these same boundaries. Your movements are economical, practiced. There is no haste in this transition from sleep to day. You pause briefly at a corner where two thoroughfares meet. Here, the smell changes slightly. It mixes the deeper scent of human habitation with the fresh, mineral odor emanating from unseen underground sources. This mixture tells you that something cleansing lies just ahead. Soon enough, you are standing on the sloping bank overlooking the stream. The sound reaches you first, a steady, murmuring, sighing sound, like liquid moving over countless small stones. You pause at the edge, letting the cool spray mist your face. The water looks dark and deep in the pre-dawn light, yet it promises relief. This is the daily ritual, the moment when the accumulated dust of slumber is washed away. You do not hesitate. You simply step forward, allowing your bare feet to meet the chilled gravel bank first. Next, you sink into the stream itself. The cold is an immediate, shocking sensation, a sharp jolt through your ankles that travels swiftly upward, prickling your skin and drawing out every sleepy muscle fiber in your legs. You stand there for a moment, simply letting the current hold you steady. It forces a kind of deep stillness upon you, making your breathing shallow and rhythmic. Slowly, deliberately, you begin to move deeper into the flow, allowing the water to rise past your knees. The cold quickly becomes an embrace, a persistent reminder of the natural world's invigorating power. You run your hands beneath the stream's gentle cascade, drawing out the accumulated grime from your elbows and the settled dirt from your wrists. You feel the subtle resistance of the current against your fingers, little pebbles tumbling together with the water, making soft, clicking sounds. As you wash through the strands of hair at your scalp, you notice how the stream seems to reflect the faint gray light of the sky, casting moving, shifting patches of pale blue and muted silver across your skin. You watch a few other figures in the distance, neighbors emerging from their homes, performing similar quiet ablutions. There is no chatter, only the continuous soundtrack of running water, the gentle roar against rocks, the occasional splash, the murmur of flowing life. Observing them, you realize that this shared act of cleansing connects you to an invisible thread passing through every person here, pulling you all through the same rhythm of survival and routine. You carefully wash your hair, using your fingers to massage the scalp, feeling the grit slide away down the drain of the stream. The water is surprisingly clear, revealing the variety of stones below, some dark and polished black by constant friction, others flecked with rust and vibrant green moss. You keep your gaze fixed on these underwater details, allowing your mind to slow down and mimic the steady pace of the current itself. Each wash feels deliberate, a conscious effort to shed not just dirt, but the lingering weight of dreams and inertia. When you finally lift your feet from the current, the contrast is immediate. Your ankles are tingling, hypersensitive to the cool air now touching them. You stand ankle deep for another minute, letting the stream's edge gently wash over your lower legs, a final rinsing. Your clothes, already dampened by residual splashes, feel heavier and cleaner than they did when you first dressed. You gather yourself, turning slightly so that your back is momentarily facing the flow. You look back at the steady movement of the water, realizing how fundamentally important this simple act of ablution is to the community's function. It is not just about cleanliness. It is a gathering point, a shared boundary between the private dwelling and the public world. The feeling that settles over you now is one of subtle renewal, a sense that whatever day brings, the market dust, the work at the hearth, you are starting with a clear slate, literally washed clean by this enduring flow. You turn back toward the land, moving slowly, testing your weight on the stones and mud banks before continuing your journey along the path that will lead you deeper into the morning's unfolding life. You continue your journey from the stream, leaving the steady sounds of running water behind you. The mud tracks are waiting, dark and rich underfoot. You adjust your pace, noticing immediately how the earth absorbs every step. There is no solid path here, only a gradual yielding of ground that meets the worn resilience of your leather boots. With each bootfall, you feel the gentle resistance of the soil giving way, a thick, sucking sound that speaks of water deep beneath the surface and countless footsteps before yours. The air shifts as you move away from the cool moisture of the stream bank and toward the center of the settlement. The damp, mineral smell of the river gives way to a complicated bouquet of human life. Wood smoke mixed with manure, stale bread cooling in baskets, spices carried by foreign merchants, and the sharp tang of unwashed wool. You lift your gaze slowly, taking in the architecture around you, the overlapping thatch roofs, the timber frames braced against time, the tightly packed density of homes that lean into one another for mutual shelter. The main thoroughfare begins to reveal itself, a wide, muddy scar cutting through the village core. Here, the activity deepens. You do not rush. Instead, you let your movements unfold with the steady slowness of someone who knows exactly where they are going, and that the journey itself is part of the destination. Your attention settles on the patterns forming in the mud around your ankles, the deeper, darker swirls left by cartwheels, the lighter, almost dusty prints trailing from a passing donkey, the scattered splashes near bins, evidence of recent kitchen cleanup. The marketplace is not a grand spectacle. It is simply where people gather to exchange what they need for what they have. It smells overwhelmingly of honest labor and necessity. You walk slowly past stalls laden with goods that speak volumes about the lives surrounding you. Here are woven baskets, smelling faintly of dried reeds and smoky dye, stacks of cured meats, emanating a musky aroma, bushels of grain, spilling over rough sacking, carrying the sweet, nutty smell of dry harvest. You observe the small transactions unfolding before you. A farmer gestures emphatically at his latest crop of turnips, pointing out the deep coloration of the leaves. His hands are thick and stained with soil, mapping every curve and crease from years spent wresting life from the earth. Across from him, a weaver examines the root structure of the vegetables, her fingers tracing the smooth curves as if deciding not just on their worth, but upon their very perfection. It is a silent conversation carried out in gestures and practiced looks. The mud dictates the rhythm of this commerce. Every few steps you take must be carefully measured to avoid sinking too deeply, requiring an almost balletic caution that forces your awareness entirely into the moment. The shifting gradient underfoot, the slight slip of packed earth near a pile of dung, the necessary lift of your ankles to find firmer ground. You slow down further as you pass by a baker's stall. The lingering warmth from the recently fired bricks radiates up through the damp air. You notice the flour dusting everything, clinging to the edges of wooden troughs, settling like fine, white snow on unsold loaves, marking the work that was done early and will continue until well after dusk. This chalky dust mixes with the earthy smell of the market square, creating a specific scent you begin to associate only with sustenance and daily ritual. Your boots now traverse an area where refuse is being sorted, a necessary corner of the market life. You observe piles of used scraps, discarded netting from fish markets mixed with lengths of stained, patched cloth, bones bleached white by repeated contact with moisture, splintered wooden crates awaiting reuse. It is a place of accumulation and purposeful disregard, where nothing truly goes to waste. Each object carries a weight not just of its material form, but of the life it witnessed, the meal it accompanied, the journey it facilitated. You pause near a small brazier from which a low curl of smoke rises, mixing with the general atmospheric musk. A group of men have gathered, their voices pitched in a low rumble of conversation and bartering. You do not attempt to listen for specific words. Instead, you absorb the texture of their collective energy, the comfortable friction of community life. They lean on staffs or sturdy poles, their clothing bearing the ingrained patina of the market dust, making them seem almost part of the physical environment itself. This deep immersion in the everyday commerce teaches a quiet lesson about human constancy. You see the same faces, marked by the inevitable lines around the eyes and mouths that tell stories of repeated mornings like this one. The transactions are constant, the exchange of labor for food, skill for coin, community for shelter, and yet each interaction seems unique in its specific gravity. The mud beneath your feet continues to be a physical anchor, constantly demanding your attention, grounding you to the reality of the place. It pulls at your soles and requires mindful movement, keeping your mind effortlessly focused on the immediate experience. You find yourself considering how much of human life must be defined by these small, repetitive acts. The careful placement of an item, the slow counting of copper pieces, the rhythmic hauling of a heavy sack. As you continue deeper into the heart of the market, the mix of smells becomes more pungent. The sharpness of fermented berries piled high in wooden tubs, the oily scent rising from small pots of frying fat, the faint, sweet undertone of drying herbs bundled tightly for medicinal use. Each aroma is a marker, indicating not just what was sold here today, but the agricultural cycles and the domestic realities that sustain this community throughout the year. You drift through these sensory layers of smell and texture. Your attention settles on the rhythm created by the movement itself, the slight drag of your cloak against rough lumber, the periodic scuffing sound of a child chasing a small dog across a patch of drier dirt, the collective murmur that rises and falls with the passage of time. It is a beautiful, imperfect symphony of survival. The marketplace remains relentlessly vital, refusing to pause for reflection or contemplation beyond its own continuous flow. You are simply moving through it, absorbing the details into your deeper understanding of time. How time here is not measured by clocks, but by the steady depletion and replenishing of goods, by the shifting pattern of mud, and by the persistent sound of voices calling out their worth. You allow yourself a small moment of contemplation while passing near a fountain basin, still holding traces of yesterday's rainwater. You watch the trickling flow, noticing how the metal spout has developed a greenish patina over time, a subtle film that hints at decades, perhaps centuries, of continuous usage. The water itself catches the pale light filtering down from the high roofs, making it appear cool and deceptively pristine against the backdrop of rich, ordinary earth. This entire passage through the market is an exercise in patience, an agreement to move with the pace of necessity. You learn that genuine engagement requires letting go of the desire for dramatic moments, accepting instead the profound significance held within the repetitive patterns of life. The simple weight of a full basket, the rhythmic cycle of sun and mud, and the persistent, enduring rhythm of people simply living together. The bustle of the market, the steady squelch under your boots, begins to settle behind you. You find yourself returning toward the familiar shelter of your home, or perhaps the communal space where work is done. The persistent dampness of the earth seems to have seeped into everything today, into the woolen seams of your breeches, onto the cool wood surfaces, and even into the small dust motes that dance in the shafts of incoming light. You move with a practiced ease, adjusting to the slow gravitational pull toward rest and routine. Your workshop awaits, or maybe it is merely an open bench near the back wall where many hands gather for tasks. The space smells differently than the market. Here, the scent is deeper, more ingrained, a complex mix of labor and permanence. It is a fragrance built from wood smoke that has settled deep into stone, mixed with the sharper tang of tanned hide and the faint, yeasty breath of fermenting scraps. You settle down onto your stool, the wood sighing faintly beneath your weight. The immediate sounds are quietened by the general exhaustion of the day's movements. Everything requires a slow return to center. You reach for your implements, perhaps the block of oak you carve on, or the bundle of sinew awaiting braiding, or simply a piece of rough linen that needs mending. Your fingers trace the familiar grain of the material. There is a comforting weightiness in these things, an accumulated density from repeated use. The tools themselves seem to remember the rhythm of hands before your own. The banked hearth fire calls you forward like a deep hum. It is not a roaring heat, but a steady, profound warmth, a protective reservoir of embers glowing richly orange beneath the ash layer. You move near it, drawing in the immediate plume of air warmed by latent burning. The smell here is overwhelmingly wood smoke, certainly, but it is mingled with the sweet, almost medicinal scent of cooking roots and simmering meats nearby. It speaks of sustained life, of survival managed through careful attention to fuel and fire. You pick up your primary tool, perhaps a worn knife with a wooden handle polished smooth by time. As you hold it, observing its edges catching the meager light, you become mindful of the sheer physical closeness required for this labor. You are surrounded by other people in their own quiet states of industry. There is no shouted instruction, only the steady, measured scrape and hush of work happening at varying degrees around you. The process begins slowly, almost ceremoniously. If you are working with wood, your attention settles on the grain. You might gently drag a rasp along the curved side of the piece, feeling the microscopic resistance of the dry fibers. The sound is delicate and intimate, a focused shik-shik that seems to measure out moments rather than distance. You observe how the light catches the newly exposed surface, revealing imperfections or hidden patterns that were sealed away by the rough outer layer. Each scrape peels back another small piece of history from the wood. If your labor is involving leather, you might be scraping bone grease off a piece of wet hide. The scent intensifies then, an earthy blend of tannic acids and animal fat. You focus on the rhythmic friction, the repetitive pulling away of resistant material. Your senses are heightened by this specific texture, the yielding elasticity of the skin under your scraping blade, contrasted with the sharp resilience of the bone. This process demands patience, a willingness to accept that progress is made in small, manageable layers. Whether you weave thread or chip wood, your primary focus remains internal, maintaining the steady beat of attention. Your body moves through practiced patterns. The hand shifts over the material, the elbow flexes, and the back settles into the required posture. You notice how this predictable routine becomes a kind of meditation, where the mind is quieted by the sheer requirement of the physical action. You draw closer to the source of heat. The radiated warmth touches your skin like a warm blanket on a cool autumn evening. It does not merely keep you from feeling cold, it seems to deepen your sense of time and place. You watch the fire, not dramatically, but observantly, the small pops of kindling, the slow descent of embers into deep red coals. This steady fire is the heart of the day's continuance. The scent of smoke becomes a background presence, constant and comforting. It carries with it the smells of everything else, the damp wool left near the fire, the smoky sweetness of baking bread crusts cooling on a rack, and the unmistakable mineral smell of coal dust mixed into the surrounding air. These are the enduring scents of collective life, the aroma of making a living. After a long period of focused, quiet labor, your muscles begin to protest with a pleasant, deep ache. It is not pain, but the satisfying residue of exerted energy. You pause, resting your forearm on the workbench, letting the cool wood temper the lingering warmth from the fire's periphery. Your breath slows in synchronization with the rhythm you have maintained for hours. You look around this corner of the working space. The light coming through the oiled paper panes, or rough-hewn window frames is already starting its gradual slide towards evening tones, a muted yellow that softens the harsh edges of the day. Everything here, from the tools to the wooden supports, looks solid and enduring under this transitional light. The slow passage of time in such a place encourages a particular kind of introspection. You are reminded that this continuous loop, wake, work, rest, repeat, is not merely routine. It is the framework upon which your understanding of existence is built. Life is tethered to the rhythm of fuel and food, to the dependable need for shelter and heat. Your hands, now stained faintly with wood dust or reddish dye from the leather scraps, feel heavy but capable. The work ahead, or indeed the memory of the work just completed, confirms a sense of grounded capability. You do not worry about tomorrow's unexpected shifts in fortune. You are anchored by the simple truth of your skill and the reliability of the fire nearby. As the light continues to soften, giving way toward the deeper blues of twilight, you sweep away the shavings and dust near your station. The sound of the broom bristles against the packed earth seems suddenly loud, marking the end of a long stretch of focused energy. You straighten up, gathering your tools, the worn knife, the block, the scrap material, with a careful economy of movement. This minor physical act feels significant. It is an acknowledgement that while the day's intensity has passed, the work itself always awaits a gentle return to rest. The urgency of the day has softened now. The last, weak remnants of sunlight are sinking into the western woods, pulling the color from the sky until it is only a pale wash of gray-blue. You feel the deep ache in your joints, the steady burn in your muscles that speaks of hours spent bent over wood or crouching in the damp earth. A weariness settles upon you, not quite exhaustion, but the satisfying, quiet fatigue of labor completed. You turn your steps away from the packed, dirty tracks and toward the low, enclosed space where your small patch of garden rests. You walk slowly now. Your boots, already caked with the day's mix of market dust, earth grit, and whatever transpired between your workspace and here, crunch softly on the loose gravel and trampled weeds at the edge of the path. The air feels different out here, thinner than the smoky density near the clustered homes. It carries the cooler scent of damp loam and buried roots. You pause briefly, tilting your head back just enough to feel the final breaths of warmth from the sinking day upon your face. The garden is not a manicured thing. It is an elbow patch carved out of necessity, bordered by rough-hewn stakes that have weathered many seasons. There are rows of tired herbs, the scent of woodruff and maybe bruised mint mingling together. You note how the shadows here are long and indistinct, merging the small piles of stacked firewood with the shadowy depth beneath a bramble bush. You move towards the communal plot, the ground giving slightly under your weight. The dirt here is richer than the thoroughfare. It has absorbed the runoff from the evening mist, making it dark and yielding beneath the surface layer of dry leaf litter. Kneeling down now, you scoop up a handful of soil, turning it over in your fingers. It feels cool, deeply saturated with moisture, and whispers back the smell of pure earth, a scent that seems ancient and utterly constant. This slow ritual of gathering earth serves to quiet the lingering activity in your mind. The day's demands, the clatter of tools, the murmured barters, they all recede slightly as you focus solely on the tactile sensation of the soil. You run your fingertips over a smooth, dark stone that must have rolled down from an embankment, examining its faint markings and the way it has been smoothed by countless passing feet. Everything here, in this small patch, seems to be reclaiming its slow rhythm. You glance across the garden where a few early evening lights are beginning to dot the neighboring plots. You can see the faint, rhythmic sway of someone hanging laundry on a line strung between two sturdy poles, a muted splash of color against the encroaching twilight. It is not an urgent scene, merely life continuing its steady process. The quiet in this space is heavy, almost tangible. It presses against your eardrums and settles over your shoulders like a cloak. You hear sounds that you had barely noticed during the day. The soft thwick of a cricket starting up song, the gentle drip from the eaves of an outbuilding, the distant, muted bleating of sheep returning to their enclosure. You sit down on the edge of a low, moss-covered retaining wall. Your legs stretch out onto the earth, feeling the slightly abrasive texture of the cool ground against your worn woolen socks. You are perfectly still for several long breaths, only broken by the minor adjustments of settling into place. The air cools rapidly now, demanding that you pull your shoulders inward a fraction to keep the warmth. This cooling emphasizes the comforting weight of the day's clothes. Looking out over the garden rows, you observe how different things manage their end-of-day existence. Some weeds have pushed up defiantly through the prepared beds, showing tenacity even in repose. A cluster of late-blooming dock leaves catch the faintest sliver of remaining light, holding a pale, almost translucent sheen before giving entirely to the growing darkness. This moment is one of necessary decompression. It allows you to reconcile yourself with the sheer physical reality of living here. The mud, the labor, the scent of burning wood that clings faintly to everything. You feel the grit under your nails, remnants of the day's movement, and recognize it not as dirt or grime, but as evidence of a life fully engaged. You realize that the satisfaction you feel now is profoundly simple. It does not come from great achievements or sudden wealth, but simply from the successful completion of routine tasks. The careful planting, the steady beating of the loom, or perhaps guiding the plowshare, the necessary walk to wash away the dust accumulated throughout the day. You notice a small puddle formed near the edge, where the garden meets the trampled common path. The water is shallow and perfectly still, catching the last reflected glow from a distant lantern being lit in one of the neighboring windows. You lean closer, observing how the reflection shimmers, a fragile mirror reflecting a temporary beauty that will soon be swallowed by night. The scent changes subtly as more lamps are lit across the village periphery. The fresh wood smoke smell mixes with the sweeter, heavier aroma of cooking over embers, stews thickening slowly, herbs boiling down to create their deep fragrance. It is the smell of community converging on sustenance, a primal and comforting rhythm that has repeated itself since time began. You spend several minutes simply watching your breathing deepen into the slow pattern of rest. The muscles in your neck unclench slightly. Your mind drifts back over the small routines, picking up the tools laid out by the communal fire last night, checking the storage shed for dry firewood, ensuring there were enough embers banked before sleeping. The repetitive nature of this existence, which some might view as monotonous, feels instead like a deep kind of bedrock stability. You know where to find the strongest root tomorrow. You know exactly how much time it takes to draw water from the well when the bucket is heavy. This reliable knowledge allows for quiet confidence. You slowly rise, brushing off the soil that has settled on your trousers and tunic. The earth seems cooler now, calling you gently toward your dwelling. Your steps are slower than they were this morning, weighted by history and fatigue, yet filled with a deep sense of belonging. Passing alongside the overgrown boundary hedge, you brush against the rough bark of an old fruit tree, its branches thick and gnarled, having witnessed countless seasons pass overhead. The quiet evening air holds all these smells together: the wet earth, the thin smoke, the faint sweetness of cooking roots, and the metallic, subtle scent of damp stone. You carry this medley of scents with you as you turn your back on the garden's piece and begin your slow walk toward the lamplight waiting at home. The day is finished, dissolved gently into the cool quiet